Hello everyone. Uh, Welcome to Viti Pathshala. So in this class we would be going to do the 10th class chapter number 2, and that is the globalization and trade. So let's start the class, and in this class we would be going to do the unit number second, and that is the globalization and the trade. Yesterday we have studied an important chapter that is related to the GDP. So I hope you have revised it. And today I would be taking the two class, one of the globalization and the trade, and the other, the next class would be of our related to the food security and nutrition. And the chapter which will be left would be the text. So this way the text chapter, it has been covered in the seventh class, then the ninth class, and in the 10th class. So the text chapter, so it is covered three times in the Tamil Nadu SCRT. So here we would be going to do the globalization and the trade. So what are our learning objectives? So good evening to all of you, and we will be starting now. Now, to know the meaning and the history of the globalization, to know the trade and the traders in the South India's historical perspective, to know the evolution of the growth of the MNC, to know the fair trade practices and the WTO, to understand the impact and the challenges of the globalization. So, let's start with the introduction. So, liberalization, privatization, and globalization have become a much talked subject among the politician, the economist, and the businessman in modern day. Now, what do you mean by the word globalization? So, it is an important topic for your prelims as well as the mains. Now, globalization is integration of an economy with that of the world economy. So, this is the basic definition. What do you mean by the globalization? So, globalization means integration of the a country with the world economy is known as the globalization. Now, basically, if we talk about the globalization, so globalization, it signifies a process of the internationalization plus the liberalization. So there are the two things. One is the internationalization, and the other is the liberalization. नाउ हिस्ट्री ऑफ द ग्लोबलाइजेशन, हिस्ट्री क्या है ग्लोबलाइजेशन की? जो टर्म ग्लोबलाइजेशन है, इसको इंट्रोड्यूस किया गया था प्रोफेसर थियोडोर लेविट. इट वाज इंट्रोड्यूस्ड बाय द प्रोफेसर थियोडोर लेविट. The historical background of the globalization can be discussed in the three stages. Wait for 1 minute. Okay. Globalization, if I talk about the globalization, the history of the globalization, it can be grouped into the three stages. So the first stage, it comes to the archaic globalization. Second stage is called as the proto globalization, and the third is this the modern globalization. So we will be talking about the first about the archaic globalization. What do you mean by the archaic globalization? The Andre Gunter the Frank argued that a form of the globalization has been in the existence since the rise of the trade links between the Sumer and the Indus Valley civilization in the third millennium BCE. So it is an ancient archaic civilization, or the we can say that the globalization is the earliest one, so between the Sumer and the Indus Valley civilization, an early form of the globalized economics and the culture known as the civilization, or the we can say that existed during the Hellenistic age, an early form of the globalization in the trade link between the Roman Empire, the Parthian Empire, and the Hun dynasty between the that made the commercial links between these powers and inspired the development of the Silk Road. The Islamic age was also an important early stage of the globalization. The advent of the Mongol Empire through though the destabilizing to the commercial centers of the Middle East and the China, they greatly facilitated the travel along the Silk Road. Now, these pre-modern phases of the global exchange are sometimes known as the archaic globalization. So the only thing that is important here is the last definition, and the other things are not important for your exam point of view. So these are the pre-modern phase of the globalization and known as the archaic civilization globalization. Next, the second type is your the proto globalization. Now the next phase is known as the proto globalization. It was characterized by the rise of the maritime European empire. Now, in the 16th and the 17th century, first the Portuguese and the Spanish Empire, then the Dutch and the British Empire. In the 17th century, the globalization became the private business phenomena, like the East India Company founded in the 1600, described as the first multinational company, and the first Dutch East India Company that is founded in the 1603 were also established at this time. Now, the thing that is important from your for your exam point of view is your the modern globalization. So, the 19th century it witnessed the advent of the globalization approaching its modern form. Now, between the globalization in the 19th and the 20th century, there are the significant differences. Now, there are the two main points. One is the global trade in his centers as well as the capital investment and the economy, and another one is the global trade in the 20th century shows a higher share of the trade in the merchant production, a growth of the trade in the services are the and the rise in the production and the trade by the multinational firms. Now, this chapter is less important unless it comes in the mains. For pre, these things are not important. Remember that pre में ये नहीं पूछा जाएगा. Only for the mains, and that is only when the globalization is asked in the way of the not in the economic way, in the your political way. Now, the next part here is the trade and the traders in the South Indian perspective. Now, South Indian trade guilds were formed by the merchants in order to organize and expand that trading activities. That trade guilds became the channels through which the Indian culture was exported to the other hands. So, what are the early traders? In the year 1053 AD, the Kaling traders, the modern Odisha, brought a red colored stone decorative objects for the trade and also the cotton textile to the Southeast Asia at an early date. The European traders, this was done due to the trading activities of the various European companies which have come to the India during this period. The discovery of a new all sea route from the Europe to the India via Cape of the Good Hope by the Vasco da Gama had far reaching repercussions on the civilized world. नाउ ये सिर्फ वही बता रहे हैं कि हिस्ट्री वाला पार्ट है यहाँ पे इन्होंने दोबारा इसको जो है this they have again told and they are telling you about the history how the globalization the modern or the medieval the globalization held so that they are talking about the Portuguese coming of the Portuguese Dutch and the French and these things we have studied earlier also हम इन्हें पहले पढ़ चुके हैं so I would be going fast here. The Portuguese, under the leadership of the Vasco da Gama, they landed at the Calicut in the May 1498. So, first person to arrive at the India was the Vasco da Gama. Now, profits of the goods brought by the Vasco da Gama to the Portugal over 60 times. So, वो आया था यहाँ से शिप जब भर के ले गया तो 60 गुना जाके उसको वहां पर जो है मुनाफा होता है. The second trip of the Vasco da Gama in the 1502 led to the establishment of the trading stations at the Calicut, Cochin, and the third is the Kannur. Now was the early capital of the Portuguese. फिर बाद में the person that is the Ninoda Kunaha. No, this is not about the South India, Raja. This is about the advent of the Europeans at the southern coast. So first they came to the southern coast. It is about your history. So revise the first part of your the modern history where we have discussed the arrival of the advent of the Europeans to the India. Now, next comes as the Dutch. The Dutch undertook the several voyages from the 1596 and formed the Dutch East India Company. That is the VOC 1 1602. In 1605, the Admiral Van den Hagen established the Dutch factory at the Masulipatam and the Petapoli, that is the Nizam Patnam, the Devanam Patnam, and in 1610, upon negotiating with the king of the Chandragiri, found another factory at the Pulikat. Other commodities exported by the Dutch were the indigo, the Bengal silk. Pulikat was the headquarter of the Dutch in the India. Next, they will come, the British will come and they will arrive in the India. On 31st December 1600, the Queen Elizabeth it granted the charter to the East India Company. On the southeastern coast, the English established at the Masulipatam in 1611 and near the Pulikat. So this is Pulikat. There is a spelling mistake. In the 1626, the Sultan of the Golconda he granted the English the Golden Farman in the 1632, by which they were allowed to trade freely in their kingdom ports. In 1639, built the fortified factory that is first in the Madras and then there at this is the Saint George and the in the Calcutta they will build the Fort William. was soon displaced by the Masulipatam as the headquarter of the English settlement on the Coromandel coast. Then the next to arrive in the India would be the Danish. Danish formed an East India Company and arrived in the India in 1616. The Danish settlement were established at the Travancore in the Tamil Nadu in the 1620, which was the headquarter of the Danish in India. They failed to strengthen themselves in India in 1845, were forced to sell all their India's settlement to the British. Then the last to arrive in India would be the French. The first French company was in the India was established in 1668 by obtaining the permission from the Sultan of the Golconda. In 1693, the Dutch captured the Pondicherry but was handed back to the French. In 1701, the Pondicherry was the headquarter of the French. Now, this was a short history of the globalization and how these people they arrived in the India, or we can say that this is the background of your the globalization in the India, and this is the same part which we have done in the history also. So it is a revision for you. Now, next we will start with the important topic, that is the globalization in India. Now, in India, the period after the 1980 and 81 was marked by the severe balance of the payment difficulties, mainly due to the hike in the oil price and Gulf War in the 1990 and hostility in the West Asia. When the new government that was the all the this was suggested, the LPG was suggested by then Manmohan Singh, and we were opening our economy to the world. Now, when the new government took over in the June 1991, India had unprecedented balance of the payment crisis. With the downgrading of the India's credit rating by some international agencies, there was a heavy fight of capital out of India. Now, since India lost its credit worthiness in the international market, the government mortgaged 40 tons of the gold to the Bank of the England. Under these circumstances, the government for 1991 to 92 presented its budget in the July 1991 with a series of the policy changes that were underlined globalization, liberalization, and the privatization. Now, this has come to be called as the India's new economic policy. तो इसको जो है भारत की नई इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसी के नाम से जाना गया. ये बहुत ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है आपके एग्जाम पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से, बिकॉज वी वर ओपनिंग आवर इकोनॉमी फॉर द वर्ल्ड एंड दीज रिफॉर्म्स वर रिक्वायर्ड. इससे पहले आपको भारत में कोई भी फॉरेन कंपनी नहीं दिखाई देगी. आपको मैकडोनल्ड, डोमिनोज, ये सब उससे पहले नहीं थे, ये सब उसके बाद ही आते हैं. So the policies were strengthened when the India signed the Dunkel draft in the 1994. Now, reforms made to adopt the globalization. So, new economic policy in India. So, first reform was the abolition of the industrial licensing except for the few industries. सो इंडस्ट्रियल लाइसिंग नहीं होगी और सिर्फ फ्यू कुछ कुछ इंडस्ट्रीज के लिए वो छोड़ा गया है, और जो कि इंपॉर्टेंट इंडस्ट्रीज हैं. नाउ रिडक्शन इन द नंबर ऑफ द इंडस्ट्रीज एंड रिजर्व्ड फॉर द पब्लिक सेक्टर. Now, fixation of the realistic exchange rate of the rupee to exchange the exports of the Indian goods. Now, foreign private sector by making rupee convertible on the trade on current account and by reducing the import duty. So यहाँ पे क्या करना था, foreign private trade उसको जो है encourage करना था, and the our currency should be converted for the trade and current account and by reducing the import duties. Now, foreign exchanges regulations were suitably amended, and the statutory liquid ratio So if a chapter comes in the bank, so you all know there are the two types of the money that has to be kept by a bank. Now one is your SLR and the other is the your CRR. So can you tell me कि इन दोनों में difference क्या होता है? What is the difference between the SLR and the CRR? So एक में तो जो है वो बैंक अपने पास रखता है and in other the bank deposit the money to the RBI. So tell me in which the bank have to deposit the money with the RBI. तो SLR होता है वो, is it SLR or the CRR? Now, this was the globalization in the India. Next comes is the multinational corporation. The multinational corporation is a corporate organization which owns or controls the production of the goods or the services in at least one country other than its home country. Now, the evolution of the MNC, like the East India Company, which came to India as a trading company and then it net throughout the country to become a political dominant. These multinationals first start their activities and the extractive industries or control the raw material in the host country during the 1920s, and then they slowly entered now into the manufacturing and the service sector after the 1950s. Most of the MNCs at present they belong to the four major exporting countries. These are the initial countries where the industrialization started. ये वो countries हैं जहाँ पे शुरुआत में industrialization की शुरुआत की गई थी. And these are the USA, UK, France and the Germany. However, the largest is the American. The 11 of the 15th largest multinationals are the Americans. Now, growth of the MNC in India, a common form of the MNC participation in the Indian industry is through entering into the cooperation with the Indian industrialists. Now, the trends of the liberalization in the 1980, it gave a substantial spurt to the foreign collaborations. Now, this would be clear from the fact that of the total 12,760 foreign collaborations agreements signed between the 1948 to the 1988, as a result of the liberalized foreign investment policy announced in the July-August 1991, there has a further spurt of the foreign collaboration and increased flow of the foreign direct investment. Now, you should know here that there are the two types of the investment which are common, which you hear again and again. One is your FDI and other is your FII. These you will hear every day in the news or you hear in the these terms in terms of the economy. And recently from the Red Fort, our Prime Minister had said that now turn make in India into m- make for world. Now India will not produce for India itself, it would be producing for the world. Now, reasons for the growth of the MNC. First is the expansion of the market territory. As the operations of the large sized firm expand, it seeks more and more extensions of its activities beyond the physical boundaries of the country in which it operate. Sorry, it cooperate. Now, next, second comes is the marketing superiorities. A multinational firm enjoys a number of the marketing superiorities over the national firms. Now, it enjoys the market reputation and faces the less difficulty in selling its product, and it adopt more effective advertising and the sales promotion technique. Now, in example, I can use the multinational company. Now, the McDonald you have now everyone knows about the burger. The preference of the choice of the people would be buying this burger or the Domino's. Now there are other competitors in the market. There are some Indian competitors also, but the people they prefer the brand or this the Domino's. Next comes is because then they don't have to sell their product would be sold easily as compared to the new players. Now, financial superiorities, it has the financial resources and high level of the fund utilization, and they can easily attract the investment. They can get the loan easily. So the I think the Netflix is about to launch there is a documentary on these people who have taken the loan from Indian government and they have not repaid. So, like the Nirav Modi, Vijay Malia, a documentary have been prepared by the Netflix that tells that how these people they engage in and how they get the cheap loans. For example, the Nirav Modi, he get the loan. At the beginning he does not had anything, but giving taking the bribe or giving the bribe to the bank employees, he get the easy loan, and from loan to loan he made the money. Now it has the easier access to the external capital market. Now capital market means that the loan you get from the capital market is your banks. Now because of its international reputation, it is able to raise the more international resources. Now this such type of the topic that is the MNC, these would appear in your the mains exam. You would be requiring to write the globalization and the MNC are more important for your mains perspective. Now, the India's top 10 largest multinational companies, these are the Sony, then the Nettle, then Hugh Left Packard, that is the HP, then the Procter and the Gamble, the Tata Group, the City Group, Microsoft Corporation, now Pepsi Company and the Coca-Cola Company and the IBM. Now, technological superiority, the main reason why the MNC have been encouraged by the underdeveloped countries is to participate in the industrial development is account of the technological superiority. Now, for example, if I talk to you about the technological superiority, the best example is the Apple. Now, the products of the Apple would be high cost, would be of the high cost, but the Apple product they would be giving you the facility best of the best in the market. Now, Indian multinational companies, these are the Hero Motor Corp. So its headquarters is in New Delhi, and in type of the industry, it is the automobile. Colombia, Bangladesh, Africa is the countries where it operate. Then the Bajaj, Pune, and the automobile, and the United Arabs, the Emirates, and the Bangladesh. So the same is with the Royal Enfield. Remember that the Royal Enfield, the bullet is of Indian company. It is an Indian company. Now next comes the TVS Chennai automobile and the Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Peru. State Bank of India, Mumbai, type of the industry, banking, Australia, Bangladesh, Belgium. Then the Bharti Airtel in New Delhi, and the communication, it has its network in the South Asia and the Africa. Now come to the fifth point of that is the product innovation. Now MNC have research and the development engaged in the task of the developing new products and the superior design of the existing product. Now that is an example. You will see that the Apple, you will find that the in the 6 months itself the technology it becomes refined. A new technology it comes in the market. For example, if I talk to you about the earphone, earlier you used to have the big earphone with the mic on the face. Then comes the headphone which were having your the Bluetooth. Then the other type of the running Bluetooth, they came headphone, and now these small AirPods they have arrived. So the technology is refining. So micro from the macro to the micro. level. MNCs, then the advantages of the MNC, producing the same quality of the goods at the lower cost without the transaction cost. MNC reduce the prices and the increase the purchasing power of the consumer worldwide. The MNC is able to take the advantage of the tax variation, the spurring job growth in the local economies. Then comes the disadvantages of the MNC. Now, if we talk about the Amazon, so Amazon, it has invested so much money this year, and now the GeoMart, it has also come as a competitor of this the Amazon, and there is a huge competition between these two companies. Now they are a way for the corporations to develop a monopoly for the certain products. They are also the detrimental effect on the environment. The introduction of the MNC into a host country's economy may also lead to the downfall of the small local business. MNC breach ethical standards, accusing them of the evading the ethical laws and the leveraging their business agenda with the capital. So this was one topic about the MNC. Next, we will be moving and we will be studying about the fair trade practice and the World Trade Organization. This World Trade Organization is a must. You should study this. These organizations from which the US is withdrawing, these are must and they may be asked in the UPSC. The fair trade is a way of doing the business that ultimately aims to keep the small farmers an active part of the world marketplace and aims to empower the consumer to make purchases that support their values. Now, raising and stabilizing the economies of the small scale farmers, farm workers, and the artisan. So, these are the objectives of the fair trade. Now, more equitably disturbing the economic gains, opportunities, and the risk associated with the production and the sale of these goods, increasing the organizational and the commercial capacity of the producer groups, then promoting the labor rights and the rights of the worker to organize, promoting the safe and the sustainable farming method and the working conditions. Fair trade is about the better prices, the decent working conditions, and the fair terms of the trade for the farmers and the workers. So what are the principles? Principles of the fair trade organizations are the creating opportunities for the economically disadvantaged producer, transparency, and the accountability. Now there are the two acts which we have to study. These are the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act 1974. This act, it referred directly to the operations of the MNC in the India. Then the FARA, and the other is the FEMA, Foreign Exchange Management Act. So its emphasis on the management rather than the regulation. It manages. Now, other points of the or the principles are the fair trading practices and the payment of a fair price, ensuring the no child labor and the forced labor, the commitment to the non-discrimination, gender equity, and the freedom of the association, providing capacity building and promoting the fair building, and the respect for the environment. नाउ दैट वाज द टॉपिक फॉर द मेंस. सो अभी जो हमने जो डिस्कस किया है, ये सारे पॉइंट जो ऊपर थे, प्रिंसिपल्स एंड द ऑब्जेक्टिव्स ऑफ द फेयर ट्रेड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, वो मेंस के लिए हैं. And for the prelims exam you would be required to study the WTO. First we will be studying about the history. Now history lies in the GATT. So earlier there was an organization that was called as the General Agreement on the Trade and the Tariffs. Now GATT, it was signed by the 23 countries in the 1947. Now remember here that UPSC will ask you this point itself. UPSC पूछेगा आपसे India was a founding member or not. So remember, India was one of the founding member of the GATT. The Director General of the GATT, Arthur Dunkel came up with a draft final act that is known as the Dunk draft was approved and they signed. The GATT primary purpose was to increase the international trade by reducing the various tariffs, quotas and the subsidies while maintaining a meaningful regulations. So ultimately, these get an organization. It was formed to regulate or to have a fair trade for all the organizations worldwide. The rounds of the GATT, first in the Geneva, the Switzerland 1947, second in the NSC, that is the France 1949, third in the Torquay, UK in the 1950-51, fourth, fifth, sixth in the Geneva itself, 56, 1960, 61, 64 to 67. Then the seventh, it was held in the Tokyo, Japan, 1973 to the 79. Eighth and the final round at the Punta del Este, that is the Uruguay in the 1986 to 1994, which is known as the Uruguay round. Then comes up the its successor. So that is the World Trade Organization. The signing of the final act at the Uruguay round by the member nation of the GATT in the April 1994, it paved the way for setting up of the WTO. An agreement to this effect was signed by the 104 members. The WTO agreement came into force from the 1995. So, which date you have to remember? You have to remember the date of the force. किस दिन से वो लागू हुआ 1995. Now, the things that are given in this, the blue box, they are very important for the prelims exam. Now, World Trade Organization, its headquarters is in the Geneva, Switzerland. The purpose was the regulating the international trade. So, members of the WTO, the Director General, four Deputy Director General, and other 600 official staff from the 80 member countries. Now, the important thing for your the mains perspective is the objective आपको mains के लिए याद रखना है. Ultimately, एक for the pre-exam के लिए आपको ये पता होना चाहिए कि objective is that the trade regulation, a fair trade, and these points you have to remember for the mains. Now, to set and enforce the rules for the international trade, to provide a forum for the negotiating and the monitoring the further trade liberalization, to resolve the trade dispute, introduction at the sustainable development and environment can go together to ensure what you have to ensure developing countries has to ensure it secure a better share of the growth. Equal opportunity should be given to resolve the trade dispute, to increase the transparency of the decision making process, introduction of the sustainable development to development, sustainable development, the development and the environment. सो दे गो इन दी हैंड इन हैंड, एक साथ चलेंगे. डेवलपमेंट भी होनी चाहिए और इन्वायरमेंट को भी जो है फर्क नहीं पड़ना चाहिए टू एंश्योर द फुल एम्प्लॉयमेंट एंड द ब्रॉड इंक्रीज इन द इफेक्टिव डिमांड. The next relative concept is the trade related aspect of the intellectual property rights. The intellectual property right may be defined as the information with a commercial value. Now, under TRIPS, patent shall be available for any invention, whether product or the process, in all field of the industrial technologies. TRIPS agreement covers the 7 areas of the intellectual property rights. Next are the what are the impacts and the challenges for the globalization for the mains only. First comes your the positive impact. A better economy introduces the rapid development of the capital market. Standard of the living has increased. Globalization rapidly increased the better trade. So सिंपल है, ट्रेड बढ़ जाएगी, देन अच्छी लोगों की लाइफ अच्छी हो जाएगी, देन नई टेक्नोलॉजी आएगी, साइंटिफिक रिसर्च होगा, एक्सचेंज ऑफ द टेक्नोलॉजी डेट विल हैपन, ग्लोबलाइजेशन इंक्रीज, जीडीपी इंक्रीज होगी एक कंपनी की, इट हेल्प्स टू इंक्रीज द फ्री फ्लो ऑफ द गुड्स एंड ऑल्सो इंक्रीज द फॉरेन डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट, वो अट्रैक्ट होगी टुवर्ड्स द कंपनी. व्हाट आर द नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट? टू मच फ्लो ऑफ द कैपिटल ऑलमोस्ट अमंग्स द कंट्री, सॉरी, introduces the unfair and immoral distributors of the income. Another fear is the losing the national integrity because of the too much exchange of the trade. Independent domestic policies, they are lost. Rapid growth of the economy has required a major infrastructure. The resource extraction now increases the negative ecological and the social cost. The rapidly increases in the exploitation of the natural resources to earn the foreign exchange. Environmental standards and the regulation have been relaxed. So, what are the challenges? The benefits of the globalization, they extend to all countries. That will not happen automatically. The fear that the globalization leads to the instability in the developing world. The industrial world that increase the global competition will lead in the race to the bottom in the wages, labor rights, and the employment practices. It leads to the global imbalance. Globalization has led to an increase in the activities, that is the child labor, because they require the labor that is cheap to produce more and more. And if they produce more and more, they would be able to export more and more, and the more globalization will be held. The people started consuming more junk food, like I told you, example, McD, Domino's. So these are all junk food. The degradation of the health spread of the diseases. Globalization had led to the environmental degradation. One of the example of the spreading of the diseases is the COVID. If there was no globalization, this the people they are going and they are studying there, that is also globalization. Not only the globalization, also the ideas, exchange of anything would be called as a globalization. At last I have to sum up and I have to tell you the definition of the globalization. Then the definition of the globalization is exchange of anything of one country with another. Now, this topic is very important for the PSIR students. There is a special heading there we study about the globalization. So, what is globalization? Exchange of anything. Here, anything I wanted to say, it may be idea, it may be good, it may be services, it may be your other things. So technology, it may be the raw material, it may be finished product, it may be the people. If they go for the study there and they settle there, that is also globalization. So this the spread of the COVID is a negative impact of the globalization. So this was all in this chapter. So do connect with the second link जो मैंने आपको link दी है दूसरे वाली, उससे connect करो. And the that is the 84th class number 84th. That was all in this. Thank you all of you.